If you've ever had a time slot once a week or once every 2 weeks that you dread, where you come in and there's no structure or you always feel like work is piling onto you, then I think you're the victim of terrible one-on-ones. These couple of weeks I've been on vacation with the family, and now they're in a park and I'm back home in the hotel room, and so I figured what better thing to do than to talk about one-on-ones. First of all, why do one-on-ones matter? I believe that one-on-ones serve as one of the primary communication tools inside of an organization, both in terms of conveying what's going on, but even more importantly in giving managers a more textured sense of what's happening in an organization and giving team members insight into what's happening higher up, so connecting all the way from the executive team to the people doing work on the front lines. So when I started working, it was actually not common practice, at least not in the first couple of companies that I worked in, to have a regular one-on-one with your manager. Instead, I would have a check-in maybe once every 6 weeks, once every 2 months about what's going on. And that would be that manager's insight into what I was feeling and what's going on in my career. That led to a couple of things. Like, first of all, those conversations were often incredibly stilted because we never had the chance to practice them. We never got good about talking about that stuff. And number two, they always got very surprised when I quit because they never really had that conversation. Those managers left important information on the table by not having one-on-ones and by just relegating that type of a conversation into informal chats or not really having structured check-ins. So why do one-on-ones matter then? Well, for the reasons that I've just mentioned, for providing information, for providing context, and I think probably most importantly as a psychological building block for trust that allows good news, bad news, all other types of information to flow through the organization quickly. You need to have one-on-ones, you need to have skip levels, you need to have all of these tools in your arsenal. While I firmly believe that the content of the one-on-one should be on the team member primarily, the fact that it happens, the fact that it's engaging, and the fact that there's an ongoing rhythm and cadence needs to be the responsibility of the manager. I think the expectations on the manager are both pretty simple, but also crucial for making sure the meeting works well. First of all, you own setting the expectations with your team member about what this meeting is going to be about. That means you need to tell them what types of topics are okay to bring. You need to tell them what's the structure of the meeting. You need to tell them what do I want you to use me for and what do I want you to go to other places to solve. I have a canned speech that I do at the beginning of every new one-on-one that I start with somebody. So this is the first time we're having it. This is what we're going to be doing. This is what we're going to talk about. This is my expectations on you. What are your expectations on me for this meeting? As anybody who's had a couple of managers knows, every manager is going to be slightly different about how they want their one-on-ones structured. If you're the type of manager that wants a very clear agenda sent ahead of time so that you have time to prepare, then you need to make sure that your direct reports understand that. Are you the type of manager that would just want to come in and shoot the shit for 30 minutes? Then you need to set that expectation as well. And I think you also need to be open with your team member on iterating on that expectation depending on what works best for them. If you're somebody that's comfortable meandering around a couple of topics and getting to conclusions by bouncing around rather than having a formal structured agenda, then you need to make sure that your team member knows this and that's something that they're pretty comfortable with as well. If it's something that they're going to get freaked out and nervous about because they're used to working with an agenda, then the two of you need to align on that, obviously. And vice versa. If you're used to running something with a very strict agenda, but your team member likes to meander through topics and this bugs the hell out of you, then that's a conversation that you need to have with your team member. I think there's really one aspect of it that is the most important to articulate and to reinforce, and that is, what is the expectation on this being a safe space? Is your team member in this meeting being judged? Are you evaluating them and their performance? Or is this a place where they can come and be open and share their insecurities without feeling like that's going to affect them negatively in their career? I've seen both. I've seen managers who expect the one-on-one meeting to be a relatively polished affair, and I've seen folks that take a very informal tack to it. I'm more of the latter. I don't believe that one-on-ones are where you do your performance evaluation, and I don't expect my team members to have their guard up. I want it to be a safe space, and I want them to be able to exhale and share their problems and vent and rant. But I know that there are some managers that don't appreciate that, or that don't see the point of having that, and where team members are going to have to find their safe spaces elsewhere. But I think it's extremely important to set that expectation early on. Related to that, there's also how polished you expect the agenda to be, whatever form it takes. Do you expect your direct report to come and bring a set of already polished strategies, and your job as a manager is to be part of an intellectual fencing exercise, basically? Or is it going to be two friends hanging out, and that's the vibe that you want, and you'll bounce some ideas back and forth? Finally, and this is super simple, but it took me, I'm afraid to say, I don't know, like 7 years to arrive at this. But it's really useful to have an agenda document, and it's really useful for you as a manager to have a template agenda document that you copy for every new direct report that you have, that you attach to the invite, that is easy to find. And when you throughout the week run into things that you have questions for your direct report about, you can dump them in the one-on-one document. One note about cadence. I think it's important to have one-on-ones with your direct reports on a weekly basis. One-on-ones serve as a building ground for a relationship. It serves as a consistent point where you can meet every week and you can talk about things, and you can learn how you work together, and you can develop rapport and all of the things that makes it so much easier to have the difficult conversation when the difficult conversation needs to happen. And you can only really establish that rapport before you need it. If you find yourself at a point where you have the difficult conversation but you don't have the rapport, it's going to be much harder to build it than if you put in the legwork ahead of time. And so I think really maybe that's for me where I see the most benefits systemically about one-on-ones. It creates a layer of trust that runs through the organization, that allows bad news to travel quickly, that allow you to deal with problems as they arise. And if you don't have it, you're not going to have that visibility, and you're going to fly blind, which is going to seem okay until it isn't. As a manager, I believe you need to have one-on-ones with your direct reports, and I believe if you do it consistently and you do it well, then your team is going to thank you for it, and your organization is going to be more performant, and you're going to have a better way of just running your team. Thank you.